My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. And the night I realized my marriage was built on betrayal began with a single cruel laugh. It was a family dinner, the kind of event where everyone dressed up, where appearances mattered more than honesty. The dining room glowed under soft lights, silverware lined perfectly on white linen, glasses sparkling with wine. Ethan, my husband of 8 years, sat at the head of the table, his posture relaxed, his smile sharp. I sat beside him, hoping the evening would be ordinary, quiet, uneventful. But betrayal never arrives quietly. Margaret, his mother, had invited not just family, but a handful of neighbors and business associates. She thrived on showing off. I wore a simple navy dress, the one Ethan once said made me look elegant. But that night, he barely glanced at me. He was too busy whispering with Vanessa, the woman sitting across the table. I had seen her before. Too often. Always lingering around. Always too close. A friend, he claimed. A business partner. I never believed it, but I never had proof. Dinner moved along with forced laughter and polite conversation until Margaret poured more wine and said, "It's wonderful to celebrate in such a beautiful home, isn't it?" Her eyes flicked toward me, cold and amused. Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Well, it's not really her home, is it? She doesn't even know whose name is on the deed." The words hit me like glass shattering. The room fell into a silence thick enough to choke on. Then came the laughter, soft, cruel, spreading around the table. Vanessa smirked, swirling her wine. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the clinking of glasses. I forced a smile, though my hands trembled under the tablecloth. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice steady only because years of swallowing humiliation had trained me well. Ethan shrugged, casual, dismissive. "Don't worry about it, Claire. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." I looked at him, at the man I had trusted with my life, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. This house, the walls I painted, the rooms I decorated, the mortgage I helped pay, wasn't mine. Have you ever felt the ground slip away while you sat perfectly still? That was me in that moment. Margaret smirked, clearly enjoying my confusion. Vanessa leaned closer, her smile cutting, as if she already knew the secret I wasn't supposed to hear. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to throw my glass across the table and shatter their performance of superiority. But I didn't, because if I broke right there, if I let them see me crumble, they'd win. So I swallowed the fire in my throat and let their laughter wash over me. I ate tasteless food, smiled when expected, and nodded as if nothing had shattered inside me. But every second, the words repeated in my head. She doesn't even know whose name is on the deed. That night, when the guests left and the house fell silent, I sat alone in the living room. The walls seemed to close in, familiar yet suddenly foreign. I touched the arm of the sofa I had chosen, the curtains I had sewn, and whispered to myself, "Whose home is this, if not mine?" The clock ticked loudly, each second pressing against my chest. Ethan slept upstairs without guilt, without hesitation. I stayed awake, staring into the dark, realizing I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I didn't know yet what I would find. I didn't know how deep his betrayal ran, but I knew this. I would not sit quietly while my life was stolen piece by piece. That dinner wasn't just a humiliation. It was the beginning of a war I hadn't planned for, but one I was ready to fight. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. The words circled in my head like vultures. She doesn't even know whose name is on the deed. I lay awake listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, wondering how a man could sleep so soundly after ripping the ground out from under me. At sunrise, I slipped into the kitchen, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at the walls I had painted, the photographs I had hung. Every corner of the house carried my effort, my choices, my sacrifices, and now I wondered, Was it even mine at all? Back then, I still wanted to believe the best. I told myself maybe Ethan had just been cruel. Maybe it was only a joke meant to humiliate me. But doubt seeps into your bones and refuses to leave. I couldn't shake the image of Vanessa's smirk or Margaret's satisfied expression. They knew something I didn't, and that made my skin crawl. To understand how much this house meant to me, I have to take you back. I wasn't born into money or privilege. My father was a truck driver, my mother a school secretary. We didn't own much, but we owned our little home, and that taught me that walls and a roof are more than just wood and brick. A home is safety. A home is dignity. When I met Ethan, I thought he shared those values. He was ambitious, charming, always chasing something bigger. He promised me stability, told me we'd build a life together that was stronger than what either of us had growing up. I believed him because I wanted to. We married young, and for years, I carried more than my share. I worked late shifts, picked up side jobs, saved every dollar I could. Ethan's business ideas came and went, sometimes promising, often failing. But I held us together. When the chance finally came to buy this house, it was my savings that made the down payment possible. I remember standing in the driveway with tears in my eyes, holding the keys, thinking, this is ours. This is the reward for every sacrifice. I decorated it piece by piece, choosing curtains on sale, repainting secondhand furniture, planting flowers in the yard. It was never perfect, but it was mine. Mine in the way sweat and sacrifice make something yours. And now, suddenly, Ethan's mocking words made me doubt it all. Margaret never hid her disdain for me. From the very beginning, she said Ethan needed someone better. I tried everything to earn her respect. Hosting dinners, dressing the way she suggested, laughing at her sharp jokes. Nothing worked. She wanted me small, invisible. And when Vanessa entered the picture, Margaret finally had the weapon she'd been waiting for. I began noticing little things I had ignored before. Bills arriving with his name only. Letters addressed to him about the mortgage, while my contribution seemed invisible. I brushed it off, telling myself it didn't matter whose name was on the paper as long as we shared the life inside. But that dinner stripped away my denial. Have you ever realized too late that the things you gave up, dreams, money, years, were handed to someone who never valued them? That's what it felt like. Ethan's attitude toward me had changed slowly over time. Once attentive, he now brushed off my questions. Don't worry about it, he'd say. You wouldn't understand. His answers grew shorter, his patience thinner. The man who once held me close now looked at me like a nuisance. And Vanessa? She was everywhere. Her perfume on his clothes, her number flashing across his phone late at night. He insisted it was business. I wanted to believe him, but my gut screamed otherwise. That dinner confirmed my worst fear. She wasn't just a mistress. She was being positioned as my replacement. I looked around the house with new eyes. The sofa I had chosen, the rug I had saved for, the bed I had made warm through winters. It was no longer mine. Or maybe it never was. I didn't yet know how deep the betrayal went. But I promised myself something as I stood in that kitchen with cold coffee in my hand. I would find out the truth, no matter how painful. Because this wasn't just about a house. It was about my life. And I wasn't going to let them erase me. Once suspicion takes root, it grows like weeds in every corner of your mind. After that dinner, I began noticing details I had ignored before. Ethan's late nights became more frequent. His explanations grew thinner. Work. Busy. Don't wait up. Those 3 words became his entire vocabulary. The warmth in his voice had been replaced by indifference, like I was just another task he had to manage. At first, I told myself marriages go through seasons. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. So I doubled my efforts. I made his favorite dinners, tried to start conversations, even suggested weekend trips. Each time, he brushed me off, too busy or too tired. Meanwhile, his phone never left his hand. His smile, the one I hadn't seen directed at me in months, appeared instantly whenever a new message came through. Vanessa's shadow lingered everywhere. Once I smelled her perfume on his jacket, sweet and unmistakable. Another time I found a lipstick stain faint on a collar. When I confronted him, Ethan laughed. "You're paranoid, Claire. Stop making up stories." His tone was sharp, dismissive. And Margaret, always on his side, added her poison. "Men work hard. Don't ruin your marriage with insecurity. That's not attractive." It was the same pattern I had lived with for years. Margaret's words cut me down. Ethan's silence confirmed them, and I was left doubting myself. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home, like your presence is tolerated but never cherished? That's what every day became for me. The house itself started changing too. Mail arrived addressed only to Ethan. Insurance papers listed his name, not mine. One afternoon, while sorting through bills, I noticed the mortgage statement didn't have my details anywhere. My stomach dropped, but when I asked, Ethan shrugged. "You wouldn't understand the paperwork. Just let me handle it." That phrase, "let me handle it," wasn't protection. It was dismissal. And I realized he wasn't handling things for me. He was handling them against me. Vanessa wasn't hiding anymore. She showed up at family gatherings with a smug smile, sitting too close to Ethan, her laugh ringing too loudly at his jokes. At one dinner, she reached for the bread basket at the same time he did. Their hands lingered, and instead of pulling away, Ethan smiled at her, like I wasn't sitting right there. My heart clenched, but I kept my face calm. If humiliation was their favorite weapon, I wasn't going to hand them victory by breaking. The worst part wasn't Ethan's cruelty. It was the conspiracy of silence. My in-laws watched the shifts, the late arrivals, the public smirks, and said nothing. Margaret, in fact, seemed proud, like Vanessa was her choice all along. When I tried to speak privately with her, hoping for some sliver of support, she cut me off. "You've had your chance, Claire. Some women just aren't meant to last." That sentence stayed with me. Some women aren't meant to last. She was already writing me out of their story. Still, I clung to the house as my anchor. I told myself, even if Ethan was slipping away, the home I built would keep me steady. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, for it to be taken from me. But unease grew stronger every day. I noticed missing documents, papers shuffled into drawers, envelopes that vanished before I could open them. My gut screamed that something was wrong. One night, I stood alone in the living room, the lamp casting soft light across the furniture I had chosen, the walls I had painted. I whispered aloud, "This is my home. Mine." But even as I said it, doubt coiled in my chest. Was it really mine? Or had I already lost it without knowing? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew this. Ethan and Margaret were hiding something. And Vanessa wasn't just a mistress anymore. She was being given pieces of my life. One paper, one lie, one signature at a time. I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not without proof, but deep inside, a quiet determination began to rise. If they thought I was blind, they were wrong. If they thought I would accept invisibility, they underestimated me. I was done waiting for honesty. I was ready to uncover the truth. The night I finally uncovered the truth began like any other. Ethan said he would be working late. He kissed my cheek absently on his way out, his cologne lingering longer than his touch. I stood at the window, watching his car disappear, a hollow ache growing in my chest. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying weeks ago. Tears no longer solved anything. Instead, I walked into his study. For years, I never touched his briefcase or files. I told myself respect meant trust, and trust meant staying out of his business. But respect had been one-sided, and trust had been a lie. My hands shook as I opened drawers, pulled folders, and sifted through papers. At first, I found only contracts, receipts, business documents. Nothing unusual. Then, buried under a pile of invoices, I found an envelope with the mortgage company's seal. My pulse quickened. I unfolded the papers and scanned them quickly. My name wasn't there, not once. Ownership had been transferred, not to Ethan, not to us together, to Vanessa. The words blurred. I sat down heavily in his chair, the document trembling in my hands. The house I worked for, the home I sacrificed for, the place I believed was ours, legally belonged to his mistress. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the air leave my lungs. For a moment, I couldn't move. I stared at the neat lines of text, the bold stamp of approval, and wondered how many signatures it had taken to erase me. Ethan's, the lawyers, the banks, all of them working together while I cooked dinners, folded laundry, paid bills. Shock slowly hardened into something else. A strange calm spread through me, steadier than rage. Have you ever been so deeply betrayed that the pain burns away, leaving only clarity? That's what filled me in that moment. I flipped through the pages again, desperate for any mistake. That's when I saw it, the transfer date. It wasn't recent. It had been months ago. All this time while I walked these rooms, painted these walls, planted flowers in the garden, the house wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to her. Vanessa had probably laughed about it in secret, maybe even picked out furniture in her mind. The humiliation burned, but it also fueled something sharper. Ethan didn't just cheat. He didn't just lie. He stole. I thought about every dollar I saved from late-night shifts, every piece of furniture I refinished, every plan I sacrificed so we could buy this house. He took all of that and handed it to another woman like it was nothing. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Just resolve. I carefully placed the documents back exactly where I found them. I wanted him to believe I was still blind. I wanted him smug, careless, overconfident. Because while he thought I was sleeping beside him in ignorance, I would be building my case. That night, I pulled out an old shoebox and filled it with what I had already collected. Bank transfers in my name, utility bills I paid, receipts for repairs I handled, proof of my investment in this home. For the first time, the evidence felt heavy with power. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew this. I would fight. Not with screams, not with tears, but with the one thing they underestimated: facts. Upstairs, Ethan came home hours later, slipping into bed with the smell of perfume still on his shirt. He didn't notice my steady breathing. He didn't know I had already discovered everything. I lay in the dark, eyes open, whispering to myself, "You may have given her my house, Ethan, but you will never take away my fight." Once I knew the truth, every detail of my marriage looked different. Ethan's late nights weren't stress, they were strategy. Margaret's smirks weren't harmless, they were knowledge. And Vanessa's confidence wasn't coincidence, it was ownership. I no longer lived in my home, I lived in their secret. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. I started quietly collecting every piece of evidence I could. I dug through drawers, checked mail before Ethan could, photographed bills with my phone. I found utilities in my name, bank transfers showing my payments, receipts from repairs I personally handled. Each slip of paper became a weapon, proof that I wasn't invisible. Have you ever realized that silence can be more powerful than shouting? That's what I learned in those weeks. I didn't confront Ethan. I didn't scream or cry. I smiled when he came home, cooked dinners he ignored, asked how his day was. To him, I was still the clueless wife. But in reality, I was a recorder, memorizing every careless admission he made. The hardest part was pretending at family gatherings. Vanessa sat across from me, smug, confident, her eyes daring me to break. Margaret praised her, calling her charming in front of everyone, as if I had already been erased. Ethan laughed at jokes that cut me, poured wine into Vanessa's glass before mine. Each humiliation I endured became fuel. They thought I was broken, but I was sharpening. One afternoon, I made an appointment with a lawyer, using a day off work as my excuse. I carried a folder of evidence, my hands shaking as I walked into his office. He listened patiently as I explained everything. How I had funded the down payment, how my husband had secretly transferred the deed, how the mistress's name was now on the papers. The lawyer's eyes narrowed as he examined the documents. "Claire," he said, his voice steady, "this isn't just betrayal. This is fraud." The word hung heavy in the room. Fraud. It wasn't just emotional pain anymore. It was illegal. He explained the steps I could take. Prove my financial contributions, highlight the fraudulent transfer, and challenge the deed in court. He told me it wouldn't be easy, but the law was on my side. I left his office with more than papers. I left with a plan. From that moment, my life split in two. On the surface, I was still the obedient wife, quiet and accepting. But privately, I became relentless. I organized my evidence into folders, backed up files, even recorded conversations with Ethan where he admitted to handling everything with the mortgage. The more I prepared, the calmer I became. Revenge wasn't about anger anymore. It was about precision. I wasn't just fighting for walls and bricks. I was fighting for every sacrifice I made, every dream I gave up, every hour of work I poured into building a home. At night, Ethan slept peacefully beside me, unaware that the woman lying next to him was no longer his victim. I looked at him in the dark and whispered silently, "You think you've won, but you've already lost. You just don't know it yet." The lawyer suggested waiting for the perfect moment, a public setting where Ethan and Vanessa couldn't twist the truth. That's when the idea of the lawyer's office meeting came. Ethan had mentioned upcoming paperwork, something he and Vanessa needed to finalize. He believed it would be the final step in erasing me. But for me, it was the stage. I would let him walk into that office confident, smug, ready to sign away my life. And then I would turn the table so hard it would crush him. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Not because I felt safe, but because I knew the storm was no longer against me. It was inside me, waiting to be unleashed. The days leading up to the meeting at the lawyer's office felt like walking through fire, while everyone thought I was made of glass. Ethan moved around the house smugly, humming while he dressed, checking his phone with that private smile I once thought belonged to me. Vanessa became bolder, visiting the house under the excuse of discussing business. Margaret treated her like a daughter, openly praising her charm, her wit, her future. And me? I stayed quiet. I played the role they wrote for me, the silent wife fading in the background. But behind every nod, every fake smile, I was sharpening my blade. I rehearsed my plan every night. I laid out the evidence again and again. Receipts, bank transfers, recordings, the fraudulent deed itself. I backed everything up on drives, hid copies in safe places, even sent one to a trusted friend in case anything mysterious happened to the originals. Every detail was airtight. Have you ever smiled at someone knowing you hold the power to destroy them? That calm, that control, it's intoxicating. Ethan thought he was untouchable. He spoke carelessly, even bragged once on the phone when he thought I couldn't hear. "She doesn't know anything," he said. "By next month, it'll all be official." His arrogance was my advantage. When he told me about the meeting at the lawyer's office, I pretended confusion. "Oh, more paperwork?" I asked lightly. He smirked, patted my hand like I was a child. "Don't worry about it, Claire. It's business." I smiled back, my face calm, my pulse steady. Inside, I whispered to myself, "Yes, Ethan, it is business, and business is about to end for you." The night before the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror in our bedroom. My reflection stared back at me, no longer the desperate woman begging for scraps of love. My eyes were clear, sharp, steady. I chose my outfit carefully, not too bold, not too plain. Professional, strong, undeniable. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, the rightful owner reclaiming what was stolen. Margaret tried to mock me that evening at dinner, making a sly comment about how Vanessa will make a lovely lady of the house. Vanessa smiled, certain of her victory. Ethan chuckled, pouring her wine. I sipped mine slowly, my lips curling into the faintest smile. None of them noticed the storm behind my calm. That night, I barely slept, but not from fear, from anticipation. The waiting was almost over. Morning came crisp and clear. Ethan dressed in his tailored suit, humming as if the day were a celebration. Vanessa arrived in a sleek dress, her perfume filling the air, her smile dripping with arrogance. Margaret insisted on coming too, eager to witness what she thought would be my erasure. They didn't invite me. They didn't need to. But when they walked into that office, I was already there, seated across the polished wooden table, my folder neatly stacked in front of me. The look on Ethan's face when he saw me was priceless. Shock flickered in his eyes, quickly smothered by arrogance. "Claire," he said smoothly, "this doesn't concern you." I met his gaze steadily. "Oh, Ethan, it concerns me more than anyone." The lawyer adjusted his glasses, sensing the tension. Papers were placed on the table, pens ready. Vanessa leaned forward confidently, already imagining the signature that would secure her victory. Margaret sat back, smug and satisfied. They thought this was their triumph, but the stage was mine. The air inside the lawyer's office felt heavy, thick with anticipation. The polished wooden table reflected the light from the tall windows, a stage set for truth. Ethan sat across from me, smug in his tailored suit, Vanessa leaning close with a self-satisfied smile. Margaret sat on his other side, eyes sharp, watching me like a hawk expecting me to crumble. The lawyer cleared his throat and began flipping through the documents Ethan had provided. "So, this transfer of ownership..." "Actually," I interrupted, my voice calm, steady. "Before we proceed, I have something to present." 3 pairs of eyes turned toward me, all with the same expression, annoyance. They didn't expect me to speak, not here. I reached into my folder and slid a stack of neatly organized papers across the table. My hands didn't tremble. I had rehearsed this moment too many times. "These," I said, "are proof of my financial contributions to the purchase and upkeep of this home, utility bills in my name, bank transfers directly from my account, receipts for repairs and renovations I personally paid for." The lawyer adjusted his glasses and leaned in, scanning the documents carefully. Ethan shifted in his seat, his confidence faltering. Vanessa's smirk wavered. Margaret's lips tightened. I continued, my tone unwavering. "And here," I added, placing the final page on the stack, "is a copy of the deed transfer. You'll notice the date doesn't align with the timeline Ethan told the bank. That discrepancy, along with my documented contributions, makes this not only unethical, but fraudulent." The word hung in the air like a hammer. Fraud. The lawyer looked up sharply, his professional mask cracking. "She's correct," he said slowly. "These documents raise serious legal questions. This transfer could be challenged in court. In fact, Claire, with this evidence, you have a strong case to reclaim ownership." Ethan's face drained of color. "Claire, don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I cut him off, my voice rising for the first time. You stole my home. You lied, you cheated, and you handed my sacrifices to her. I turned toward Vanessa, who looked suddenly small, her confidence slipping. Did you really think you'd live in my house while I disappeared quietly? The room was silent, except for the sound of Ethan's shallow breathing. Margaret tried to interject, her voice sharp. Claire, you don't understand. No, Margaret, I said firmly, locking eyes with her. For once, I understand perfectly. You wanted me erased, but you forgot something. I don't vanish. I fight. The lawyer cleared his throat again, now firm. This matter will need immediate legal review. Ethan, Vanessa, what you attempted here could have serious consequences. Ethan slumped back in his chair, sweat gathering at his temples. Vanessa looked away, her hands tightening into fists. Margaret sat frozen, the smugness wiped clean from her face. I gathered my papers calmly, sliding them back into my folder. My voice softened, but the steel in it remained. You thought you were building my destruction. Instead, you built my case. And now I'm taking back everything you tried to steal. I stood, the chair scraping against the polished floor. Every eye followed me as I walked to the door, heels clicking with a rhythm that sounded like victory. In that moment, I wasn't the humiliated wife anymore. I was the woman who had turned silence into a weapon, who had transformed betrayal into power. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't need to. The weight of their shame was loud enough. Walking out of that lawyer's office, I felt lighter than I had in years. For so long, I carried the weight of silence, smiling at dinners while my husband mocked me, swallowing insults from Margaret, pretending not to see the smirk on Vanessa's face. They thought my silence meant weakness. They thought I was already gone. But silence isn't weakness. Silence is preparation. That day when I laid my evidence on the table, I wasn't just proving ownership of a house. I was reclaiming every sacrifice, every hour of work, every dream I gave up believing in a marriage that was never equal. Ethan thought his lies would bury me. Margaret thought her disdain would erase me. Vanessa thought her smirk was victory. In that office, I showed them all that betrayal may wound, but it does not destroy. Have you ever realized that the moment you stop begging for love is the moment you find your strength? That was my turning point. I walked away with dignity intact and power in my hands. The house was never just walls and a roof. It was a reflection of my fight, my endurance, my worth. And I took it back. I don't know what their future holds, lawsuits, shame, loneliness, but I know mine is brighter now. Because I am no longer invisible, I am no longer silenced. If my story touched you, if you've ever felt betrayed or erased, remember, you are stronger than they think. And if you want to hear more stories of justice, betrayal, and revenge, stay with me here on Revenge Inside. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let's remind the world together. Silence may hide power, but it never erases it.